Hello, good evening, guys. So I'm just getting set up like I generally do, because you know I love to interact with you. So I want to make sure that I can see my comments. Generally do, because you know I love to interact with. And let's see. Okay, cool. So I've got this Go Live pulled up. So now I can see when you talk to me. So today has literally flown by. I have worked the past 2 days at my nursing job. I was off today and I work tomorrow before I have 4 days off. So I'm really looking forward to the 4 days off because it's good to get time in with my kids. Pardon me. Because I know that, it's summer vacation and they like to get into stuff. I don't know how your kids are coping with summer vacation or how they generally do with that. Mine go stir crazy, so I like to get them out of the house. So today we went to West County Mall, and that's a pretty fairly, sized mall by where we live, and we did have some fun. We actually had lunch at the California Pizza Kitchen, which we hadn't been to in years. And it was a really good lunch. We hit up the bookstore. I really stumbled upon this one place where they sell pictures. So one of them is directly behind me. I grew up with this picture hanging up on my wall. My mother had it hanging up. The difference was it was a picture within like a golden oval frame. And it's always been one of my favorite pictures ever in life. And even when I work at my nursing job, I wear that like little elastic armband of sorts. I'll have to wear it during one of my next Go Lives to show you. And it has them on it. Because for me, it's all about that energy of knowing that in whatever shape or form that we all have somebody who's looking out over us, I think, and I really love how that angel behind me is helping the kids get across a broken bridge, even though they're scared, and in the background, very much like when I was like teaching about each individual tarot card, how the colors are predominantly dark, and so it's that uncertain energy. She's got like that light around her and there's like a star above her head, which to me speaks of the star card from the major arcana, which is all about hope. So when I look at this, I even make ties in my mind from tarot to even that picture. I love it. It's got a bit of that Empress energy, that motherly energy. It's just beautiful, And then I also have a picture with Wednesday Addams from the Addams Family show on Netflix. Her and the hand, which I believe, well, let's see. No, they don't call it it. I don't think so. I'm brain farting, but it's the little hand that accompanies her in the show. I have a picture of that too. So basically, yeah, that's the gist of it. So, I'm always trying to keep it fun and interesting, and there's so much you can do with tarot. It's really versatile, So Sasha Graham, 365 Tarot Spreads is the book that I used to come up with our tarot spread for tonight. And I don't know about you guys, but I love like scary type stories and movies. And thank you very much, because you know how I brain fart, Tim. The Hand is Thing is its name. Thank you. I couldn't come up with it because I remember Cousin It was the little guy with the top hat with the long hair. He looked like a big old mop, walking around. So that's why when I said it, I'm like, no, that couldn't be it, So with the interview with the vampire, you guys, I have to chime in and tell me if you have a preference. On AMC, they did have a season with a different take on that story. I actually liked it. I know it got some bad reviews, but I really liked it and what they did with the story. But of course, I am a fan of the OG with Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise and what is it, Kirsten Dunst is how you pronunciate her name. I'm a fan of that one. I remember being in high school when that came out. So, you know, like for me, I look at movies like art. So each director and so forth may do it a little differently, but I can appreciate those differences. So I really think it's cool in this book how Sasha Graham wrote a couple fun facts about the movie. She said that, or actually this is in regard to the book, Anne Rice wrote Interview with the Vampire in only 5 weeks, shortly after the devastating death of her 5-year-old daughter. I read that and I'm like, wow. So it sounds to me like she lost herself in her work, you know. And it also states in here that it was back in 1976 when she published the book Interview with the Vampire. It was innovative because it was the first Gothic novel displaying sympathetic supernatural creatures. Her monsters were philosophical, lonely, and experienced moral conflict. So I really like that. And it says here with the summation of the spread we're doing tonight, the themes and characters from Interview with the Vampire are at play in your life, and the questions in the spread are inspired by them. So we're talking about that overall energy, right? So I think this would especially be good if, say, you have a movie night and you have people over, and say if you're watching like especially in October, anything, say, with like horror movies and so forth, you could totally rock out like a vampire theme and do this reading, you know. So for me, I'm going to stick to the Radiant Rider-Waite-Smith as I'm continue to do these, because I feel like, again, we have people who are on different, they're in different places learning about tarot, and I want to make sure that I'm doing you guys right with teaching this stuff. So I just moved it down here. So basically some things you've probably overheard before, but I'll briefly go over them. So generally speaking, you can have just one deck. You don't need to have more than one deck. You generally have the person who you're reading for pick the deck that resonates with them most, or if you're reading for yourself, that's what you would do. And then as you shuffle the deck, you would basically ask the querent or yourself, kind of like think about what you need clarification on, what's kind of got you stumped, because as you're shuffling, it's your energy that's getting onto these cards. And then you would just, basically the individual would just keep shuffling until, the best way to word it is intuitively, they feel like they're at a very good stopping point. And then at that point, they would hand the cards back to you for you to put into the spread for interpretation, or of course you would interpret them on your own. But yeah, I see this as a cool spread for over Halloween, you know. So let's say we already did that. We're at a good stopping point. And I've got kind of limited space on my altar space, so I'm going to get a little... Sometimes I get creative with overlapping because of my limited space, you know. All right, very cool. So really what I've noticed is this spread is in the shape of vampire fangs, which again, I like that about Sasha Graham's book, how her spreads do seem to take on the shape of whatever she's referencing, right? And so then we're going to flip all of them over. So in total, we have 8 cards. Now, at any time, if you have any questions, feel free to leave me a comment, and I will be looking at my comments as I go over this spread. So we're going to work. I know for you guys, you get a mirror image of what I do on these go lives. This is left. This is my left. And I'm going to work my way up, kind of like a V or a U shape or horseshoe shape. I'm going to go like this. Then I'm going to start over here and do that second side. So the first question would be in regard to the character Lewis from the movie. And this is, what do, say, I need to know, or what do you need to know, which we'll just simply say me. We'll say it's about me. What do I need to know about my sensitivity level? And when I see this, this does remind me a lot of Lewis from the book and the movie. From the get-go, as a new vampire, the way he marveled at the world and its beauty, how he still had a respect for humanity, and how it was a very big conflict between the nature of a vampire and the need to feast on blood for survival, yet the remaining love for humanity, right, that Lewis felt. What I'm seeing in this card, when we ask this in regard to the energy of Lewis, say, what do we need to know about, say, my sensitivity level? And in regard to that energy would be the Hermit. This does resound with me because, let's say, if there's been a lot of stimuli, say if it's been a bit overwhelming, if there's something that's been on my mind quite a bit, I do like time to myself, to where I don't have to interact with others, where I can be alone with my thought processes and really kind of gather my thoughts on the matter, and then determine after much reflection about how I can take what ownership I can for my place in the situation or in my life, and then kind of figure out how the path will be illuminated, say by this lantern. And again, here we have the star inside the Hermit's lantern. We have hope, which is very much a nod to the star card in the major arcana, you know. And I also like how with the Hermit, we've always talked about how the Hermit leaves the top of the mountain to help other people with their knowledge, not just themselves. So, you know, it's also kind of like being a beacon of light for other people who may be lost. So I think that's like keeping in mind, even when we're all struggling through things and self-doubt and different crises that pop up, to know that we're not alone with this thing as far as our human existence goes. So I really like that we have this card for Lewis. It makes a lot of sense to me. Again, feel free to add your thoughts on the cards as we pull them. The second card we have is in regard to the vampire Lestat, which is basically, how do I like to show off? And so we're talking about this energy, say, in regard to myself, okay? We're looking at the world. So this is the last card in the major arcana, where things kind of like this Ouroboros have come full circle. We have that balance. We have reached this like end of the fool's journey by this card. You know, when I look at this and I think about this in regard to, say, Lestat, it does make sense. He was very showy, and so just like this lady, he would actually lavishly dress, both in the books and the movies. He was not one to ever want to hide in the shadows. He liked the good things in life, living in nice places, having nice things, being recognized in society and regarded. You know, and I think one of Lestat's shadow sides in the book and movie was just his fear of being alone. He, as the years went by, he was more lonely despite all of those things he had materially, not to mention his good looks. You know, people were attracted to him for that, and his, he had that charisma that people were drawn to. I think for me, if I was to try to apply this energy to myself as to how I like to show off, I would say at this point in my life, my flaws and all, I am very confident in the body I'm in. I have long surpassed the need or desire to want to be this skinny person necessarily. There's nothing wrong with being healthy and making good choices, but I recognize as women, we're meant to be curvy, and that from childbirth and from getting older and stuff, that things do change with that, and you just own who you are. And I think for me on my life journey so far, that confidence in myself and my own abilities has come full circle to where, yes, I'm still very much on that journey. But looking at it from Lestat's energy as to how I like to show off, I would like to say because I'm comfortable enough in my own skin that maybe other people can be a little comfortable too, knowing they're around somebody who is very much flawed, but accepts that, you know. So that's one way of looking at that. So for the third card would be in regard to the character Claudia, as to the energy of her and how am I childlike. And with this, we have the major arcana card, the Chariot. And when I see this, if we're thinking about that childlike energy like Claudia had in the movies, this kind of reminds me of the scene where she, early on, when she was a new baby vampire, Lestat and Lewis would buy her all these porcelain dolls to where she had all these beautiful dolls in her room. But then as the years went on, she developed the mind of a woman, but yet unfortunately was stuck in a child's body. And she was very resentful of that. And, you know, she went out, she ultimately killed this beautiful woman, and then basically had the woman who was dead on her bed covered in dolls. And then Lewis and Lestat discovered her, and that led to this really big blowout of hate and resentment, especially from Claudia, for her form that she could never change. No matter what she did, if she cut her hair off, it would grow right back. When I see this card and I think of her energy from that novel and from the movie, I think of how confident she was as a vampire hunting. She very much embraced her vampire thirst and used her childlike beauty and innocence to seduce people in order to feed on them quite a bit, and was very proud and pretty well owned her journey. I could see that very much with this card, and I also think of how a child plays. So this could be a child who may have had a box that they constructed to a chariot, and they used some sheets or curtains to make the backdrop, and maybe some dolls or of some sort. Or even the kids they would be playing with would act like they would be like the theoretical lions or horses drawing the, pulling the chariot along. But when we see this energy as far as the spreads go, and we're talking tarot, we're talking about somebody taking that authority over their life, the reins literally, and moving forward and making that progression. So I think for me, I am really big on taking ownership for myself because I realize my actions impact other people. I like the idea of making progress all the time. I don't like feelings of stagnancy and not growing. I like growing and developing and even being a little challenged, just not overly so. So, and I actually, of the two groups of people, I actually enjoy being around children and elderly people the most. And especially with children, I think of that like wonder, the innocence, the intelligent questions they do ask of the world around us. So I honestly, as I get older, I hope to continue to revere those traits, especially in little ones and children, because that's what keeps you young, is just being open to all those awesome questions they ask and to try to see things through their eyes that unfortunately we lose that sense of wonder as we get older, And then let's see. So the fourth card would be immortality, okay? So the question is, and this is kind of a doozy of a question from Sasha Graham's spread, is what lives forever? And we have the eighth card from the major arcana, which is strength. So I think throughout that whole narrative that each of those characters displayed strength in some similar ways and some contrasting ways. And I really feel that if we were looking at it from characters, I would think that Lewis would have felt very much like our lion, and Lestat would have been the one trying to close his mouth and get him to act right, behave correctly, and so forth. Because Lewis rejected his nature as a vampire so much, and at times his actions would put them at risk of exposure, and Lestat is very much having to stifle that energy. Or with Claudia, when she was angry and resentful, or especially when she was a baby vampire and killing all these people, Lestat and Lewis, but especially Lestat, who really loved his vampire daughter, had to teach her how to, feed from all these people, but then hide them so that they would not be discovered and hunted. So I could see different characters taking on different roles with this. And now with strength, we do have that single-minded focus. And I think immortality from a certain viewpoint would be seen as a burden, very much similar to Lestat's viewpoint about feeling very lonely as the years went on, and then, the people and the customs change, and feeling very much out of sorts as time goes by. With the strength, we do have that single-minded focus. So I feel like if someone doesn't have, say, a reason, even in vampire form, a reason to focus and do things day by day, then it's like, then we're getting more into these depressed feelings, feelings of being lost, and how it's this constant cycle, right, of give and take that's needed. And that obstacles are okay, right? Obstacles are part of life. So I think for me, since obviously I am not an immortal, and, I am immortal and I will die at some point, I see strength as just the tenacity to take things day by day and do the best that you can, and to support those around you the best that you can, to have a good life. And to see the bright side of things, because we have the predominant yellow background here, and we have abundance with the green. So I like to be comfortable, have my bills paid for, and have my family taken care of. So see, we each see something different in the cards, but that's what I see with this, The fifth card is in regard to change. What helps, say, me or you accept change? Okay, and we have the Queen of Swords. Now, the Queen of Swords is very much a fierce energy, does not mince words. What she says ultimately goes. She is very fair. She will hear somebody out, but she's not one to have games, played. Even despite chaos in the background, ultimately she does obtain that clarity, because with the swords, we're talking about thought processes, communication, and action with that suit. So in regard to the movie, as far as like what helped those characters accept change, unfortunately, Claudia, like we were talking about, was doomed never to be able to change. And unfortunately, toward the end of the movie, or even the novel, Lewis ends up having a bit of a romantic relationship or bromance with Armand. Lestat at that point they thought was dead, but unfortunately he was trying to heal in the swamp after Lewis and Claudia had dumped him there after tricking him and so forth, because they were trying to get away from him at that point in the movie. Now, what helps us accept change for me when I see this, it's the hard, cold truth that life is what it is. And that sometimes what we would want our life to look like, ideally, cannot actually exist for different reasons. And it's seeing it for what it is, and it's dealing with it accordingly, and just being very matter of fact, So at that point in time in the movie, I remember Claudia looking at Lewis like, she's like, if you love me, or however she said it, she's like, you will give me this lady as my mother and not leave me alone, because that was her worry. She did not want to be alone in the movie, because Lewis did not ever want to damn somebody to that existence, but he did because of his love of Claudia, because he was very much capable of feeling love despite being a vampire. It really did show, I really like how Anne Rice showed the sensitivity to that character. But very much Claudia embodied this. Lestat very much embodied this, especially with his charisma. He was not one to mince words. He did not coddle Lewis in any which way, you know. Lewis would be more so attuned to, say, the cups suit more so than the swords. This is more fitting, I say, of Lestat and Claudia's characters, even more so than, say, Lewis's character in the movie, you know. So the sixth card, as we move along, we're now on the second portion here of what would be the vampire fangs, would be how would, say, the characters best cope with loss, or how would I cope with loss, right? Or let's see here. Let me think of how to word this here. So we're looking at the Two of Wands. So this reminds me of the juncture in the movie where it was right before Lestat was murdered by Lewis and Claudia. Namely, Claudia took most of the ownership with his murder, which they thought he was murdered, but he really wasn't. But at this juncture in the movie, the two of them want to get away from Lestat, like really bad. And, you know, Claudia has read in her novels about different vampires that are all around the world, and she wants to seek more of their kind out. And Lewis is actually curious of this as well, because he is very intellectual. They both love books. Him and Claudia both do. So they're thinking about traveling. They're formulating a plan, but they're being very careful how they do that, because Lestat is always present, and he's extremely intelligent and picks up on things. So this is, will they be brave enough to try to break away from Lestat and leave the home, the only home that they've known, which would be as a trio? It would be Lewis, Lestat, and Claudia, to leave that framework and structure and to go off, you know, murder him, to murder Lestat, and to take off together into the unknown. And it's untelling if those vampires would be nice to them or not, especially if word got back that they had killed one of their own, which was one of the few rules they had, was not to kill one of their own. And then I especially see these red roses, which makes me think of love, because even though they resented him, they did both care for Lestat in their own ways, you know. So that's what I see with this. And then as far as what helps me accept change would just be, you know, even if it's not always realistic, I do like to think of the possibilities in life and what could be, and making goals, because it keeps things interesting. So that's how I personally would relate to that energy. So our next card would be, how do we deal with, say, loss? And we have the Nine of Pentacles, okay, which is known as the Lush card. And in regard to our characters, well, like we talked about, they lived well. Lewis, before he became a vampire, he was the owner of a beautiful plantation, you know, and that was in Louisiana. Unfortunately, he lost his wife and one of his children. And back then he was a drunkard. He slept with a lot of women. He put himself at risk quite a bit despite being well-to-do. Lestat was lonely. He was attracted to Lewis. He's like, well, that could be a good person to hang out with. And Lewis was predominant in, or prominent in society with all these things that Lestat held in high regard. Claudia very much enjoyed being the child of these two vampires and having tailored dresses and a beautiful room full of dolls and just having all of her needs met. But then as far as how we deal with loss, I don't believe the answer to that would be material possessions. I think one of the shadows of this card would be, despite having all of these material things and having all this lush green vegetation and all these coins, right, in whatever shape or form they take, ultimately, before we go to the 10th and final card in that suit, we're going from that individual energy where they're alone to where the 10th by that card, they have someone to share it with. So I think it shows the need for grounding when we experience loss. Like for me, I want to be outside and barefoot and maybe stand on the grass for a little bit, or even have my feet touch the concrete, which my porch swing sits on, as I listen to the birds and I take in the world around me. And there's, grapes in the background. So for me, I might have an alcoholic beverage or two. I might have some occasional wine. I've got my animals around me, just like this lady, She's got her little falcon with the blinders on. There's the comforts of home. We got the castle in the background. And just, being grateful for what you have, because loss is a part of life. I feel like, again, we have to transverse past the material onto having our tribe, our support system, right? So the next question would be in regard to sexuality, as far as like, how do I meet my needs, or how did those characters meet their needs in that movie or novel? We do have the Three of Cups. So with this would be them basically enjoying each other's company and merriment and debauchery, celebrating each other. Claudia was not sexual because she was a child. And again, we're talking adult energy, okay? With Lewis, he looked at Lestat like kind of like a father, a mentor in a way, even though a cruel one, and then more so like a brother. And then he was definitely attracted to Armand in the books. Lestat, I do believe, was attracted to Lewis for a short time until he found that Lewis was so sensitive, it turned him off, and he got tired of nagging at Lewis to stop doing things that put them at risk. But they would generally interact with both male or female. So it would appear, at least to my understanding of the novel, that they could be bisexual in nature. They could go either way. Honestly, it was more about the challenge of acquiring the food, if that was sexual to them, was just the hunt, For me, as far as like how I meet my own needs, I would say that I am very happy and comfortable in my marriage, and I have fun with my husband and make the time to have fun and spend time with him, and to switch things up every so often. I certainly would not be interested in a third wheel myself. I know some people do that, but that would not be my style. We'll leave that at that, to each their own, okay, with this. And then power, okay, would be another card here as to where would we invest our energy, okay? Like, what would be the priority of the characters in that movie or ourselves? And we have the Ten of Pentacles, which we were just talking here about how we're going from the Nine of Pentacles, that solitary energy, despite it being a lush card, to where we have the 10, where we've got family, multiple generations, animals in the picture, and they're not even paying attention to all these coins, right? So again, our characters in that movie were very much they had a great lifestyle as far as having the things that they needed to do well. They were adaptable. They could live anywhere and prosper. They seemed to run into some bumps when they didn't interact with each other as well toward the middle to the latter end of that movie. For me, this is my everything. No matter what happens in my daily life or life in general, I hold in high regard my friends and my family. That's, to me, the fabric of a life that's lived. And then for me personally, I always know that tower could always come crashing down, so it's like trying to pay attention to the things in life where the foundation might have cracks or crevices that are detrimental to where it could compromise that structure, knowing that if I don't take ownership in my life of various things, then life is going to happen. And sometimes it does anyway. But just being grateful for what you have each and every day, and being proud of your heritage and your roots and your home, to me, that's the true symbol of success and power, would be in the people you love dearly, And then overall, so I'm going to count our cards. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's see here. Let's see. There's Louis, Lestat, Claudia, immortality, change, loss. Let's see here. I feel like I have skipped one. I'm going to look at her book here because we have one extra card. I want to make sure I remember correctly what it is here. Let's see here. So we have Louis, Lestat, Claudia, immortality, what helps me accept change, loss, okay, sexuality, okay, which now, okay, well, let's see, I kind of liked how I was looking at it initially. That made more sense to me. But her book, I may have had some extra cards I put down because I was going based on memory. But that is what it is here, you know. So because with reads, you can totally play it by ear and you know, tweak it however you want. I'm going to go ahead and sum up my reading, how it resounds with me. So what is the major takeaway from all these elements? If we had to fine tune it into a single card. And we have the Hierophant. So looking again back at the movie and the book, you know, again, with time and experience, Louis learned what he needed to adapt in life, to become a vampire and even live independently on his own. Lestat, unfortunately, became a recluse. He lived in a house, afraid of helicopters whizzing by and of modern life. Very much deformed from his attempted murder way back when. And just when Louis came upon him, he was just a shell of his former self. And then with Claudia, she had passed away with her mother that Louis had made her shortly after her mother's birth. They were burnt alive. So I feel like with our experiences that we do learn a bit more, we become a bit wiser, especially when we learn the rules of the society or where we work, or we learn the organization, the structure, then we do adapt and overcome. Literally from learning about these things, it's like you're given the theoretical key. For me, I just see just the hard knocks of life. That's how you learn. And, you know, you just kind of, you know, go with the flow with the life journey and obtain the knowledge that you can. And I would say not to compromise, you know, when faced with, say, adversity or if things don't agree with you, but and to remain true to who you are. You know, because with this card, the Hierophant, you're talking about rules, structure, a gatekeeper. So I would wonder, is this a gate that I really want to open, you know? So, yeah, so that would pretty well be how I would sum up this reading. I hope I didn't lose you guys toward the latter part of my reading, but this has actually been a lot of fun, really. I've enjoyed this quite a bit. So whenever you watch this, feel free, if you were to have any questions or anything, you can leave them in the comments for me, or if you're shy, which is, it's totally fine if you're shy, you can shoot me a message and I will help you. And I hope that you have a great evening. And if you are so inclined, feel free to watch Interview with a Vampire, just to stick with their theme. And I will talk to you later. Good night.